Picture this. It's 1961. A mother walks into Woolworths on a Saturday afternoon, her daughter tugging at her sleeve, eyes wide with wonder. They approach the toy department, and there, gleaming under the fluorescent lights, sits a doll that would change everything. A doll that costs exactly $3. A doll named Barbie. But here's what nobody tells you about that receipt. That simple piece of paper from a Woolworths toy department. That receipt, it's worth more than the doll itself today. And I'm not talking about monetary value, though we'll get to that shocking number in a moment. I'm talking about what it represents. Because in 1961, when that cash register rang up $3 Barbie doll, it recorded something revolutionary, something that the toy industry executives, the cultural critics, and even Barbie's own creator didn't fully understand yet. See, that wasn't just a toy being sold. That was the beginning of a cultural earthquake that would reshape childhood, redefine femininity, spark protests, inspire careers, and become, against all odds, one of the most controversial and beloved icons of the 20th century. And it almost didn't happen. Stay with me, because what I'm about to tell you about that Woolworths receipt, about those early Barbie years, about the woman who fought every obstacle to bring this doll to life, it's going to change how you see that plastic figure forever. Let's transport ourselves back to that Woolworths store in 1961. If you never experienced a Woolworths, imagine the original everything store. Long before big box retailers, before shopping malls dominated the landscape, Woolworths was where America shopped. The toy department wasn't some separate superstore. It was maybe 2 or 3 aisles, tucked between household goods and the lunch counter. The smell of grilled cheese and cherry Coke would drift over from the soda fountain, mixing with the scent of new plastic and cardboard. Children would press their noses against glass cases, pointing at treasures that seemed impossibly exotic. And there, in 1961, among the baby dolls and teddy bears and toy soldiers, sat Barbie. But she wasn't alone. She was surrounded by controversy. Here's what you need to understand. In 1961, Barbie was only 2 years old as a product, but she was already dividing America. The doll that we think of today as wholesome, all-American, even conservative, she was considered scandalous, dangerous, even. Why? Because every other doll in that Woolworths toy department was a baby doll. Little girls were supposed to practice being mothers. They fed their dollies, changed their diapers, rocked them to sleep. This was the 1950s blueprint for girlhood, preparation for domestic life. Then Barbie showed up with a ponytail, a striped swimsuit, and the body of an adult woman. She didn't need to be fed or changed. She didn't cry. She wasn't a baby at all. She was independent. Let me tell you about Ruth Handler, because this is where the story gets really good. Ruth was a businesswoman in an era when that phrase was practically an oxymoron. She and her husband Elliot had co-founded Mattel, and by the late 1950s, they were doing well with music boxes and picture frames. But Ruth had an observation that wouldn't let her go. She watched her daughter Barbara. Yes, Barbie was named after Ruth's actual daughter, playing with paper dolls. Not baby dolls. Paper dolls of adult women. Barbara would create elaborate scenarios. These dolls went to college. They had careers. They went on dates. They wore glamorous clothes. They had futures, not just present-tense maternal duties. Ruth saw something the entire toy industry had missed. Little girls didn't just want to practice being mothers. They wanted to imagine being grown-ups. They wanted to dream about who they might become. So in 1956, during a trip to Switzerland, when Ruth saw a German adult doll named Bill Lily in a shop window, everything clicked into place. Lily was actually a gag gift for men, based on a saucy comic strip character. But Ruth saw past that. She saw the prototype for something revolutionary. She bought 3 Lily dolls and brought them back to America. Now here's where it gets interesting. And by interesting, I mean Ruth faced rejection after rejection after rejection. The men who ran Mattel, including her own business partners, thought she'd lost her mind. An adult-bodied doll? For children? They said it was inappropriate. They said mothers would never buy it. They said little girls wouldn't want it. They said it would destroy Mattel's reputation. But Ruth Handler was stubborn, and she was right. She insisted that Mattel's design team work on prototypes. She pushed through every obstacle. She fought for realistic proportions, or at least the idealized proportions that would define Barbie's controversial figure. She insisted on detailed clothing, on quality materials, on treating this doll like a fashion model, not a toy. And in March 1959, at the American International Toy Fair in New York City, Barbie made her debut. The toy buyers were skeptical, but they placed orders anyway, maybe just to see what would happen. And then, by 1961, the year of our Woolworths receipt, Barbie wasn't just a success. She was a phenomenon. That first year, 1959, Mattel sold 300,000 Barbies. By 1960, that number had exploded. And by 1961, you couldn't walk into a Woolworths without seeing Barbie dominating the toy department. But let's talk about that $3 price tag for a moment, because it tells us something fascinating. $3 in 1961 is equivalent to roughly $30 to $35 today. That wasn't cheap for a toy. Baby dolls could be had for half that price. But Barbie wasn't competing with baby dolls. She was positioned as something premium, something special, something worth saving allowance money to buy. And parents were paying it. Week after week, Woolworths cash registers across America were ringing up those $3 Barbie sales. So what was it about this particular doll that captured the imagination of millions of little girls? And, let's be honest, frustrated millions of mothers and cultural critics? First, there was her look. That first Barbie, the one you might have bought at Woolworths in 1961, came in two versions, blonde or brunette. She wore a black and white striped swimsuit, had distinctive white sunglasses and golden hoop earrings. Her makeup was dramatic, arched eyebrows, red lips, a sideways glance that seemed almost knowing. She didn't look like a toy. She looked like a miniature fashion model. And that was entirely the point. But here's what really set Barbie apart. The clothes. Oh, the clothes. Mattel didn't just sell a doll. They sold a lifestyle. From that first year, you could buy additional outfits for Barbie. Career girl with a suit and briefcase. Evening splendor with a gown and fur stole. Easter parade with a spring coat and matching hat. Each outfit was meticulously designed, with tiny buttons that actually buttoned, little zippers that zipped, genuine fabrics in miniature. A mother might balk at spending $3 on the doll, but then her daughter would want the outfits. At 50 cents to $5 each, the clothes added up fast. Mattel had accidentally, or maybe not so accidentally, invented one of the most brilliant business models in toy history. Now, I mentioned controversy earlier, and we need to talk about it because it's essential to understanding why that 1961 Woolworths receipt represents such a pivotal moment. From the beginning, Barbie had critics, loud ones, organized ones. Parents complained about her figure. Child psychologists worried about body image issues. Religious groups found her immodest. Feminist critics called her a symbol of objectification. Conservative critics called her a corrupting influence on traditional values. And you know what? Some of those criticisms weren't entirely wrong. Barbie's proportions, if translated to a real human woman, would be physically impossible. Her emphasis on fashion and appearance could send troubling messages about what matters for women and girls. Her lifestyle of dream houses and pink convertibles promoted a materialistic vision of success. But here's the complicated truth that those early critics missed. The truth that millions of girls understood instinctively as they played with their Barbies bought at stores like Woolworths. Barbie represented possibility. When a little girl in 1961 played with a baby doll, the script was pretty much written. You're practicing to be a mommy. You feed, you nurture, you care for a dependent being. It's not that there's anything wrong with that. Motherhood is profound and important, but it's limiting when it's the only narrative available. When that same little girl played with Barbie, the script was wide open. Barbie could be anything because Barbie wasn't anything yet. She wasn't defined by relationships or obligations. She was defined by her clothes, sure, but those clothes represented different roles, different possibilities. She could wear a nurse's uniform, a flight attendant outfit, an astronaut suit. And yes, Barbie really did have all these careers, even in those early years. The magic wasn't in the doll itself. The magic was in the blank slate Barbie represented. She was a projection surface for dreams. Let me paint you a picture of a typical scene, one that played out thousands of times in Woolworth stores across America in 1961. A mother and daughter are shopping. Maybe they're there for school supplies or household items. They pass the toy department. The daughter stops, transfixed, staring at the Barbie display. "Please, Mom? Please? I've been so good. I'll use my allowance. I'll do extra chores." The mother hesitates. She's heard things about this doll. Strange things. She's not sure a doll with breasts is appropriate for her 8-year-old. But she sees the longing in her daughter's eyes. She remembers being a girl herself, wanting things with that particular intensity. Maybe she thinks, it's just a doll. How much harm could it do? She doesn't know that she's participating in a cultural revolution. She doesn't know that 50 years later, her daughter will remember this moment with crystal clarity. She doesn't know that the receipt the cashier hands her, that piece of paper showing $3 Barbie doll, represents a tiny but significant crack in the foundation of how society defines girlhood. She just knows her daughter is happy. Let's talk about what made that 1961 Barbie an actual achievement of design and manufacturing. In 1959 to 1961, Barbie was made in Japan. Mattel had partnered with Japanese manufacturers who had the precision and skill to produce the doll at the quality Ruth Handler demanded. This was still relatively unusual, American toys made abroad, and it was part of the post-war economic relationship between the U.S. and Japan. The doll's body was made from a vinyl plastic that was soft enough to pose, but firm enough to hold its shape. The internal structure included a wire armature that allowed Barbie to stand on her pointed toes, those permanent high-heel feet that would become one of her most criticized features. Her face was hand-painted. Let that sink in for a moment. Every single Barbie doll sold at Woolworths in 1961 had been individually hand-painted by skilled workers. Those arched eyebrows, those red lips, that distinctive side-eye glance, all done by hand, one doll at a time. The hair was either rooted saran fiber, for the ponytail style, or implanted in plugs. Each strand had to be individually inserted into the scalp. The level of craftsmanship required was extraordinary, especially at that $3 price point. By 1961, Barbie wasn't alone anymore. In 1960, Mattel had introduced her boyfriend Ken, named after Ruth Handler's son, Kenneth. Ken was positioned as Barbie's steady companion, though their relationship status remained strategically ambiguous. Were they dating? Engaged? Just friends? Mattel left it to children's imaginations. Ken's introduction was brilliant from a business perspective. Now you needed 2 dolls, not one. And of course, Ken needed his own wardrobe. More sales. More trips to Woolworths with that receipt total climbing higher. By 1961, Mattel had also introduced Barbie's first friend, Midge, though the really famous friends, Christy, Skipper, Teresa, would come later. The world was expanding. The possibilities were multiplying. And with each new doll, each new outfit, each new accessory, that Woolworths toy department had to dedicate more shelf space to the Barbie phenomenon. Here's something fascinating. By 1961, adults were already collecting Barbie. Not just buy her for their children, but collecting her for themselves. The first adult Barbie collectors were often mothers who bought the doll for their daughters and then became fascinated themselves. They'd see a new outfit at Woolworths and think, I'll just get one to keep in the box. They'd buy duplicates, one for playing, one for keeping pristine. By the mid-1960s, there were organized Barbie collector clubs. Today, those early Barbies from the 1959 to 1961 era, the ones bought at Woolworths for $3, can sell for thousands of dollars. A mint in-box 1959 number 1 Barbie can fetch $25,000 or more at auction. That Woolworths receipt for $3? It's now a collectible in itself, a piece of authenticated provenance that can significantly increase the value of a vintage Barbie. As Barbie's popularity exploded in the early 1960s, so did the backlash, and some of it was quite serious. Child development experts worried about the emphasis on physical appearance. They conducted studies suggesting that Barbie promoted unhealthy body standards. They argued that the focus on fashion and material possessions was damaging to young girls' values. Educational advocates complained that Barbie encouraged passive, appearance-focused play rather than active, creative play. They preferred toys that developed problem-solving skills, physical coordination, or educational concepts. And then there was the class angle. Barbie's lifestyle, even in 1961, was aspirational. She had multiple outfits, accessories, eventually a car and a dream house. She represented an affluent lifestyle that many American families couldn't afford. Critics argued this promoted materialistic values and made children from less wealthy families feel inadequate. These weren't frivolous concerns. They were legitimate questions about what we want childhood to be, what values we want to instill, what messages our toys send. But Ruth Handler had a response, and it's worth considering. Ruth Handler argued that Barbie gave girls something no other toy did: the chance to imagine adult life on their own terms. In interviews, she emphasized that Barbie had no prescribed story, no forced narrative. Unlike books or TV shows that told girls who to be, Barbie was a tool for self-directed storytelling. Ruth also pointed out that the career outfits, nurse, teacher, and later astronaut, doctor, businesswoman, were expanding girls' sense of what was possible for them. Yes, Barbie wore fashionable clothes, but she wore them at interesting places, doing interesting things. Was Ruth entirely right? Was she rationalizing a product that had some genuinely problematic elements? Probably both are true. Barbie was and is complicated. She's both empowering and limiting. She's both imaginative possibility and restrictive stereotype. But in 1961, in that Woolworth store, with that receipt being printed, she was undeniably something new, something that tapped into what millions of girls wanted, a way to imagine themselves in the future. Woolworths itself is part of this story in a significant way. The chain represented democratic access to consumer goods. Unlike high-end department stores, Woolworths was for everyone. It was on Main Street in small towns and in urban neighborhoods. It was where working-class families shopped alongside middle-class families. This meant that Barbie, despite her relatively high price point, was accessible. A girl didn't need wealthy parents to get a Barbie. She needed parents willing to spend $3, maybe saved up from several weeks of allowance or earned as a birthday gift. The Woolworths model meant that the Barbie phenomenon crossed class lines in ways that a more exclusive retail strategy wouldn't have allowed. When Woolworths eventually closed its American stores in 1997, it marked the end of an era. But for those who remember the chain in its heyday, the toy department, with its glass cases and its carefully displayed Barbies, remained a vivid memory. By the mid-1960s, Barbie was fully established as a cultural icon. The early skepticism had been replaced by acceptance, even if the criticism never entirely went away. Mattel had proven that Ruth Handler's vision was not only viable, but extraordinarily profitable. The business model Barbie established, the base doll plus an endless stream of accessories, outfits, friends, vehicles, and playsets, became the template for toy marketing for decades to come. Action figures for boys would follow the same pattern. Collect them all. Buy the accessories. Build the world. But beyond business, Barbie had changed something fundamental about how we think about toys for girls. After Barbie, the idea that girls only wanted baby dolls became obviously limited. The market exploded with diversity. Fashion dolls, action figures for girls, career-focused toys, empowerment-themed products. Some of this was positive progress. Some of it was just more sophisticated marketing. But the conversation had shifted, and that shift started with a $3 doll sold at Woolworths in 1961. Today, looking back at that Woolworths receipt from 1961, we can see it as a historical document that captures a moment of cultural transition. Post-war America was beginning to question traditional gender roles. Women were entering the workforce in increasing numbers. Birth control was becoming available, giving women more control over their lives. The feminine mystique that Betty Friedan would challenge in her 1963 book was already showing cracks. Barbie was both a product of this transition and a contributor to it. She reflected changing attitudes about femininity. Women could be glamorous and capable, decorative and independent. She also shaped those attitudes by giving girls a toy that embodied those contradictions. Was Barbie a feminist icon or a patriarchal product? The answer is yes, both. always both. And that complexity is part of what's made her such an enduring figure. So let's return to where we started, that Woolworths receipt. That simple piece of paper showing a $3 charge for one Barbie doll in 1961. It's a receipt for more than a toy. It's a receipt for a cultural moment, for a crack in the foundation of how we define girlhood, for a business revolution that would influence toy marketing for generations, for a controversial, complicated, endlessly fascinating cultural icon that, against all odds and all criticism, became one of the most recognizable figures in American popular culture. That mother who walked into Woolworths in 1961, her daughter tugging at her sleeve? She had no idea she was participating in history. She just wanted to make her daughter happy. She spent $3, not nothing but not a fortune, and she got a receipt that, today, represents so much more than its simple transaction record suggests. Every revolution starts somewhere. This one started with a businesswoman who wouldn't take no for an answer, a plastic doll with an impossible figure and limitless possibilities, and a $3 receipt from a Woolworths toy department in 1961. So here's my question for you. If you could go back to that Woolworths in 1961, knowing everything we know now about how Barbie would change toy culture, childhood, and our conversations about gender and identity, would you buy one? Would you let your daughter have one? Or would you walk past the toy department and choose something else? Think about it, because how we answer that question says a lot about what we value, what we fear, and what we hope for the next generation. If this journey through a 1961 Woolworths receipt and the early years of Barbie fascinated you, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button. We're diving deep into the cultural history hidden in everyday objects, the stories behind the things that shaped our world. Every receipt tells a story. Every ordinary object has an extraordinary history, and I'm here to uncover it all. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and let's keep exploring the fascinating history hidden in plain sight. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.